2021. Although the circuit only joined our calendar last season, it's been a regular testing venue and tends to deliver a fair balance between the different manufacturers as a result. As for overtaking hotspots, they don't come any bigger than Turn 1. The longest start-finish straight on the calendar at 1,047 metres sees riders reach 320 kph before a long, heavy braking zone. Key race-leading overtaking manoeuvres there last season. The next real opportunity is into the tricky Turn 5, downhill into what's now the slowest corner on the circuit. The second half of the lap here, meanwhile, has undergone several changes in recent seasons to improve safety. In fact, MotoGP have used 5 different layouts in 3 decades here, 4 of those in the last 7 seasons. For 2021, speeds will still reach 265 kilometres per hour down the back straight, but instead of the hard stop we saw last year, it's now a longer sweep up towards Turn 12. A new circuit length, 4.657 kilometres. The lap record slate is wiped clean. The first World Superbike action here in Montmeló with fans in the stands. Race 1 of the Hyundai N Catalunya round. 8 rounds done and dusted. After 8 rounds last year, we'd already completed our season. A few interesting comparisons that I'm sure I'll highlight on the grid. But suffice to say, the man who's made the difference since our last visit to Barcelona is Toprak Razgatlioglu, now the series leader. Steve English alongside me. We're in KRT's backyard. They need a big weekend after the events of the French round 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and this is going to be a big race for an awful lot of riders. You can see the fans in the stands and the umbrellas are out. We just had a Supersport race interrupted by rain, and seeing who could adapt the quickest to those conditions. It looks like the Superbike stars are going to have to do the same as well.
And we've still got 7 minutes until pit lane opens. We've still got a little bit of time before the race starts. Just when we were towards the end of that Supersport race saying, well, we know that the tyres are obviously going to be slicks because we've got dry weather, and more or less the riders who were running well in the closing stage of that Supersport race were those that had banked on slicks or had made the decision to come in. Well, it's all back up in the air again now, quite literally.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see how everyone adapts to it, because we've had dry weather all the way through this weekend. In the testing here through the course of pre-season, we had dry weather as well, so this really is a jump into the unknown for all these riders. We'll wait and see how heavy the rain is, because we saw in the Supersport race how quickly it dried out as well.
Opportunities in these kind of circumstances for major points gains, but more importantly for the championship contenders, major points losses.
Well, it was interesting actually coming into this weekend. I was talking to people within Yamaha, and they said they were really keen to have a bit of wet weather as well. They want to see how Toprak stacks up in the rain against Jonathan Rea, and they want to show the progress that he's made. Obviously with Toprak, it's not so much a case of making sure he's able to bring the fight to Jonathan Rea, just show that he's got that progress and he's got that confidence in the wet conditions now.
13 consecutive races with a rider on the podium for Yamaha, their best ever run. They're celebrating 60 years of their heritage with a new racing livery, and it looks very smart as well this weekend.
Yeah, Yamaha Europe Speed Block colours are out in force, and really nice to see that as well, and they're bringing that across the board really in all the classes over the course of this weekend, in the endurance classes as well, so that's good to see.
Toprak Razgatlioglu is your World Championship leader by a 7-point margin over Jonathan Rea, and it could have been 6 more. He was first to the checkered flag on 3 occasions in Manicor a fortnight ago, only 2 of those a race winner. Last lap penalty for track limits in the Superpole race, denying him what could have been a first treble.
Yeah, Toprak likes those leathers, but the one thing about it is we see it time and again when teams and riders bring out one race specials, and sometimes it ends great, sometimes it ends badly, but once the rain starts to come in like this, that adds a whole new variable to that bit of luck as well.
Yes, I think "oh no" would have been the first words probably, particularly for Rea and Razgatlioglu, honestly, because the rest of the field will rub their hands together and say, do you know what, a bit of weather could give them an opportunity.
Well, to be honest, for us as well, I really want to see a battle between Toprak and Jonathan Rea. You want to see those 2 riders, the 2 best riders in the World Championship, going at each other, and you want to see it where it's as equal as possible. This isn't where it's equal. This is where there's an absolute variable thrown into the mix, and we'll wait and see who adapts the best. We know Jonathan Rea always adapts well.
A grimace from Jonathan Rea as Perariba came back towards him. Rea, remember, is the former championship leader in 2021. He is one of the experienced hands, 6 times a world champion. just that one win from the Superpole race last time out in Manicourt that he's managed in the last 3 rounds. Even then, he was outfought actually on track in Manicourt. Second in the championship. You'd have to say he's on the back foot at the moment. Is this an opportunity for Jonathan Rea? Toprak hasn't necessarily favoured wet conditions in the past.
This is a real opportunity for John. Let's see what Paribas has to say. Reba just saying they'll make the decision on the grid about the tyres, so they might send them out to the grid with the wet weather tyre just to give him that chance just to get to the grid, and then you make your decision a lot closer to it. Obviously, there is a time limit once you're on the grid to make your decision on tyre selection, and these teams are going to give it every second to make that decision.
Dry setup, he said as well there. What are the options for the riders to kind of change? Presumably suspension is one of those things that they would look at.
Yeah, they'll soften the suspension if it is a wet race, or they'll stiffen it if it's dry, and certainly on the way to the grid, it just depends how much rain's actually come down. Obviously, we can see in these shots that there's a lot of rain. We can hear it on the circuit microphones as well, but we saw in the Super Sport class that it wasn't equal all the way around the lap as well. There were some areas where it dried really quick. There were some areas that took a long time to dry, and that's where your sighting lap becomes really important. And it's also where we could easily see riders do 2 laps to the grid, just roll back down pit lane just to get that extra lap of experience.
Andrea Locatelli here leading a group of riders from 4th position down in the championship standings. Fresh from the news that his contract has been renewed, a 2-year extension to it. And that's the reason for the delay around that announcement, because it was largely anticipated that he'd be racing still, staying put for 2022. He'll also be adding another season to that one. Last night we were having a chat with Michael Ruben Rinaldi, and we said, how about the weather? And I think that he's going to blame me for this, frankly, because I said I'd quite like to see a little bit of rain and see the order shaken up.
Oh, we've got a real chance to see that order shaken up. You can see for Rinaldi, one of the riders out there, just getting himself into wet weather configuration, and he's putting on his wet weather sliders. You can see on his leathers there the small pucks on his knee. In the wet conditions, you'll have a much bigger knee slider.
Michael Ruben Rinaldi, 6th overall in the World Championship. This season certainly hasn't provided him the breakthrough he would have hoped for. Results from one race to the next, really all over the place. And in terms of consistency, that's been the biggest problem for Ducati all round. In fact, mentioned the statistics after 8 rounds previously. Michael Ruben Rinaldi on fewer points than he was at the end of the season in 2020. So that's Michael Ruben Rinaldi then. We're looking into the KRT pit box. Remember, it's a home round for KRT this weekend. Very important one in the 2021 title race for them, particularly for Jonathan Rea. Alex Lowes here celebrated his 31st birthday on Tuesday, a single podium in Manicourt 2 weeks ago. For Lowes, it could easily have been 2 and probably should have been 3. Crashes in the feature races, dropping him from 4th to 5th in the championship standings. But Lowes is another rider we've seen in the past here in World SBK, goes well enough in the wet.
Yeah, and Lowes obviously had that instant in the morning warm-up session as well. Free practice 3 came together with Chris Ponson. Big impact on his finger and his shoulder. So the wet conditions can help that as well. It's all about trying to be as smooth as possible. It's not quite as forceful, so we'll see how he's able to deal with that. You can see Tom Sykes just getting himself ready as well. All the riders know that the key at this stage is just to try and keep as calm as possible, because the rain is coming down heavier and heavier now at this stage.
Yes, pit lane opens in just over 20 seconds. It's all smiles at the moment for Tom Sykes, but it wasn't last time out in Manicourt. His run of 20 consecutive scoring finishes brought to an end. Not the best of weekends really for him. Only 13 points from 3 races. He's 7th overall in the standings, and he certainly hit the ground running here in Barcelona this weekend. He's had decent performance and decent pace through free practice, and of course that pole position that he netted earlier on here today, his first since Phillip Island 2020.
And you can see as the pit lane opens that the rain really is coming down. I'm just looking at the commentary box window to see who's getting ready to head out. Leon Haslam looks like he's going to be one of the first riders out, and we'll see if he does opt for 2 laps to the grid. These superbike riders, especially whenever you're at a relatively new track, if you go to a place where we've been for years, and Haslam's a good example of this considering how much experience he has, they'll know where the water collects, they'll know where the rain drains to, and maybe at a newer track like this where you don't have quite that level of experience, that can mean that you take that step into the unknown a little bit. That could be where someone like Scott Redding or Alvaro Bautista that have a lot of experience here could have a bit of a benefit.
And you can see that livery now in action as far as Yamaha are concerned, and they'll be hoping that it's a good luck omen for them because it's, I understand, a Saturday livery, Saturday afternoon livery, so it could be a one-off, and what can they do with it?
This is what's quite good as well here in Catalonia as well. You can see the apron for the pit is the asphalt, and then you've also got a concrete area just in front of the pit building, so you can actually see just how much rain has come down. It is sheltered across the concrete, whereas you look at the red painted areas there, you can see just how much rain has collected. So a lot of rain has fallen, but we saw in the Supersport class how quickly that rain dried as well.
Well, the great thing is that we're at the top of the main grandstand along the start-finish straight here in Catalonia. We've got when the action is in the pit lane, as it was in the Supersport race last time out, or when the action is on the grid, we've got the perfect view of it.
Yeah, and we're lucky with the vantage point we have here, and definitely is a case of, for the riders right now, they're not going to love the view, but it's definitely going to give us a lot to talk about during the course of 20 laps of Superbike action.
Toprak Razgatlioglu there at 6th place in his only previous race start here in Barcelona. Of course, he was deprived of 2 races here in 2020. He had a crash in the Sunday morning warm-up session. Alex Lowe's just making his way down pit lane. This is what you were talking about previously as well, Steve, that riders, as they make their way out, really getting a look at the ground and getting an understanding of what the conditions are going to be out on the circuit.
Well, I just got a message from Anthony down in pit lane, and he said that for the last 5-10 minutes it really has started to hammer down, so that's going to leave it proper wet weather conditions at this stage. But obviously we've still got 20 minutes before the start of the race. We've still got 24, 25 degrees air temperature, so we've still got it where you could have quite a lot of drying going on out there as well. But there are going to be some places where the water collects to a much greater extent out here.
Yes, we saw that in the Supersport race a few minutes ago, that because of the undulation of the circuit, some of the lower lying areas of this Barcelona circuit obviously collecting water to a greater extent. That's a crash for Garrett Gerloff, just making his way towards the line, and that's going to be extreme frustration for Garrett Gerloff. And there goes that special livery for the GRT Yamaha.
Yeah, and that bike is very badly damaged. You can see the handlebars are broken there for Gerloff, so he's not even going to be able to get that bike back to the pits in all likelihood. Here's a replay. He's just going to lose that rear end. Just hits that white line, and that takes it around. And unfortunately for Garrett, that's all she wrote for today.
Garrett Gerloff then, before he's even made it to the line, the discussion about Gerloff of late has been about him trying to recover his confidence. He looks up to the sky in frustration and desperation, and compare this to his breakthrough weekend here in Barcelona last season, his famous battle for race 2, his first World Championship podium, and it's misery by comparison a year on.
I have to say, my heart goes out to Garrett Gerloff with the form he's been in recent weeks, the pressure he's put himself under after Assen, and then this is just the latest blow for him. It's that's going to be really tough for Garrett to deal with.
And it's one of those situations where inevitably these conditions are going to throw up all of those kinds of risks. We've seen it before, and it does mean that there is also a risk when we go racing here today. 20 laps to try and safely negotiate in wet weather conditions. If it can happen to Garrett Gerloff, it could happen to anyone out there.
Yeah, and we'll wait and see how everyone else manages to get around. It is easy for that to happen even on the siding lap, and that first time riders have gone out. We heard from Parariba that the expectation was that Kawasaki were going to go out there to the grid with bike and dry condition settings, but obviously you can see just how wet it is out there. But maybe for Garrett Gerloff, something like that might have played a factor as well as hitting that white line. But small mistake, big consequences.
Yes, anything anyone can do out there to try and do something different from the rest of the field? What might we anticipate the majority of the field are going to be looking at doing here over this 20-lap race?
Well, that Gerloff incident's going to just give them all exactly what they have to do: survive, get through this one. And for Toprak, we know that wet weather was an issue for him in the past. At the Czech round in Most, he went out on the Friday afternoon. He was one of the few riders that went out to get quite a few laps in, and he actually came back into the pits and told the team, you know what, I quite enjoy riding in the wet now. Is he going to enjoy it today?
look at the grid then. The front row, Tom Sykes, Toprak Razgatlioglu and Jonathan Rea. This is Toprak Razgatlioglu. 9 consecutive podiums coming into this weekend. A record for a Yamaha rider. 5 of those have been victories. Remember, he was 37 points down after Assen. He now leads by 7 3 rounds later. He is your championship leader, Toprak Razgatlioglu.
He is the championship leader, but he's going to be the man now that knows in this race, this is damage limitation. This is where if he can come away with a top 5 finish, that's actually a great result for Toprak. Shows the progress that he's made in wet conditions.
Yes, we heard about there being a strategy between himself and Kenan Sofuoglu. I wonder whether that strategy accounted for this kind of race that throws the door open to Jonathan Rea. We're really into uncharted territory in 2021 for Rea. In none of his 6 title-winning campaigns has he trailed 5 rounds from the finish. In fact, he's had an average lead of 63 points at this stage. This has certainly been a very different season.
Yeah, really different championship campaign for Jonathan Rea. He's up against a rider that's able to match him in terms of consistency, able to match him in terms of speed, and able to match him in terms of the team around him. He's got so much confidence in his Kawasaki team. Toprak's got the exact same in his side of the pit box in the Yamaha.
Jonathan Rea, winner of the first ever Superbike race held here in Barcelona. Remember, that was race 1 of the 2020 Catalunya round. Recent form here at this venue. Rea has actually scored 3 points more in 8 rounds this season than he did in 2020. The difference certainly has been Toprak Razgatlioglu finished the 8-round 2020 campaign 132 points down on Rea. He currently leads him after 8 rounds this season by 7. Your pole sitter is Tom Sykes, a man with a great deal of experience, of course, enjoying his best season with BMW in year 3 of their project. 71 points more than he managed last year, 20 more than at the same stage in 2019, and it's a bit of a shame actually that he's been displaced by rider movements ahead of 2022.
Yeah, Tom's done a really good job through the course of this season and made a big step forward with that package, and he's definitely done a much better job this year than previous years. BMW brought that project forward, but for Tom it's a little bit unfortunate as well that in the wet conditions of today he can't really take the full benefit of that pole position.
Here is the signature Montjuic trophy that will be presented to the winning riders and teams this weekend, and in acknowledgement of Barcelona's motorsport history as well, the famous 24 hours of Montjuic and 17 stagings of the Spanish Motorcycle Grand Prix, all held on the streets of the city of Barcelona, and an attractive and unique trophy for this occasion.
Yeah, and the rich history that we've had for racing in this area is nicely reflected.
Yes, and we've had, of course, 30 years of history in the Grand Prix paddock here in Barcelona as well. Riders just settling in on the grid. We've already introduced you to Tom Sykes, Toprak Razgatlioglu and Jonathan Rea on the front row. The second row of the grid will feature Scott Redding, Alex Lowes and Andrea Locatelli. It's Scott Redding who'll be lining up here from P4. And as for Redding, top scorer in Most and Navarra, his deficit to the leaders, though, almost doubled last time out in Manicor. He was runner-up in race 1 here last season, but wasn't really one of his best weekends. Only 32 points, and one which really put the final nail in his 2020 aspirations. I think we might be able to hear from Scott Redding. We've certainly got Anthony Nelson down on the grids.
Thanks, Alex. Just a quick update. It still is raining fairly consistently down here. And Scott, we saw you just laughing with Johnny about the conditions right now. We saw in the Super Bowl, in Supersport, how uneven it is out here. And what did you see on your outing lap?
I saw that Gerloff crashed. It's not really a good sign, but puts a spanner in the works, doesn't it? You know, you want an interesting championship, you got it, you know. So let's see now what we can do with rain. Nobody's done any rain laps. Now we're on the grid, no setup, no nothing. So we'll have to just see, really.
Best of luck, Scott.
Thank you.
Opportunity as well for the likes of Scott Redding, who, remember, is back down to 72 points adrift in the 2021 title race. Had a really disappointing French round. He was only 38 points down coming into Manicor, but a run of 7 consecutive podiums ended with his fall in race 1, and only in race 2 did he really recover any form. He's the kind of rider who needs big swings, and wet weather conditions might provide him with that. This is Andrea Locatelli, who completes that second row, and back at the venue where he was crowned Supersport World Champion, of course, last season. This is rookie Superbike campaign. Take some reminding yourself of that. He was 11th after 4 rounds this season. After 8, he's now 4th. This only his 25th start in the class, of course, but he's become a regular podium contender.
Yeah, and for Locatelli, this is going to be a very different set of circumstances as well, jumping into wet weather to try and keep that run of top fives going. But he's looked really good all the way through this weekend as well, and he knows this track very well from his Grand Prix days. He also has raced on it in wet conditions as well, so he'll know what to expect.
Mr. Superpole extending his honours at the top of that table. Might not have a ride confirmed as yet for 2022, but he's doing his very best to demonstrate to